Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, representative for the 6th Council District, and Chairperson of the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon's work session, voting session, is for Bill number 20. John Bullock of the 9th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mark Conway of the 4th District. Brian Dorsey of the 3rd District.
Thank you,
Councilwoman Odette Ramos of the 14th District. Robert Stokes of the 12th District. And we also have Councilmember Eric Costello of the 11th District with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also have Nikki Thompson from the Council President's Office online.
Thank you,
And
Madam
also
Chair.
Aaron DeGraffenreid from the Council President's Office online.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We also have Nina Thimulis and Sophia G. from the Mayor's Office present. Let's begin. Bill number 21-0113, zoning code modifications for the purpose of making needed changes to certain provisions that during the course of actively operating under the new zoning code were discovered to be functionally impractical or otherwise in need of modification to abate previously anticipated consequences and generally relating to the zoning and land use laws of the city of Baltimore. This bill was sponsored by the council president for the administration, particularly for the Department of Planning. This bill was introduced on August 16th, 2021. Public hearing was held on March 1st, 2022, and that hearing was recessed. And now we have been having several work sessions. The first one was on May 10th, then May 24th, July 26th, September 13th, and October 4th, 2022. So today we are now in our 7th work session for this modification. And just want to say that this, just keeping in mind that for the committee that, you know, everything that we voted on at the last session and continually voting on are things that impact the entire city. It's a citywide decision. And as we're going through this, we do have an opportunity to possibly create separate bills to have more community input depending on what the subject matter is. So just keep that in mind as we're moving forward. And there will be some things that we're going to be discussing that we don't have the written finalized draft of the bill in front of us. So some things I will allow preparation for those before second reader as we're voting. So hopefully we'll get through this day and move forward. So on that note, the committee has the of the proposed amendments in front of us. And just a reminder, this copy was released on October 18th for us to follow. I hope you're following that same one. And the things that are shaded are the amendments that we voted on in the last work session. So we're going to start. Before I do that, does the committee have any comments at this point? So on page, it's page 2 of your packet. And the item number 1, the general provision, correct code section number and definitions, I just want us all to agree that as we're handling all of the technical information that, these are things that are under this first amendment. They're all technical. And we agree to handle them technically. Can I get a yay for that we want to follow? If I don't hear a nay, that means a yay. Okay. And also, under that, we do have a technical amendment with Councilman Costello. So we can go ahead and, Councilman Costello's amendment, okay, and that was amendment number 200. 17-407A and G, and substitute 17-407A, comma, E, 3V, comma, E, 4V, and G. And that's attachment G.
That's, Madam Chair, that's item number 1, correct, on page 2 of the hard copy printout on our colleague's desk?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to number 2.
Madam Chair, pardon me, Madam Chair, point of order, are you voting them or?
We just agreed that anything technical like that, it's basically, we're going to agree to, do we have to do it separately? No, okay. So in lieu of time, because it's technical, we don't have to.
Oh, we don't have to vote it?
That technical things, your amendment passes.
Oh, so you're just doing it by the chair is doing a voice act.
I'm not doing a roll call. Okay, let me just review the page number, and then I'm gonna do a motion and a second, and then we just all in favor or not, yay or nay. That's all we have to do with, basically with amendments, but I had asked before, little technical things like this, do you still want to go through each one individually?
Madam Chair, I was just wondering, since it's the purpose clause and the general provisions, don't we?
I can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Since it's the purpose clause and general provisions, don't we want to do that last after we've gone through all the amendments and then we vote on the general provisions and the numbering and all of that last?
I'll accept, we'll do it last.
Because there might be some others that we need to put in there that we may need to correct. Is that correct?
Let's
Right.
move on to item number 2. Okay, this was exemption, utility, and governmental uses. Tamara, you just want to say something about that again, and we can go ahead and vote.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to talk about items 2 and 3 together because number 3 actually prompted number 2. So I'll start actually with number 3, where when we proposed an amendment in the code that spoke to giving the city carte blanche authority for any installation, structure, equipment, or accessory that's owned by the government. And then we proposed adding the language "or on public right-of-way." And that was deemed to be too broad. So we agreed and will agree to amendment number 3 to strike that. But in lieu of that, we proposed number 2, which is a more precise exemption. So we propose in number 2 to add a new 11 to section 2202 that says any installation, structure, equipment, or accessory that is used by a government entity for internet or telecommunications and located on public property.
Thank you. So that means we're going to vote on number 3 before number 2.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Dorsey, that's your amendment?
Yeah, I would just suggest we could move both of them simultaneously. Removing 3 creates the room for number 2, and if we could just move them together, it makes
Thank
just as
you.
much sense.
Yes, we can. So I got a motion moved by Dorsey, a second by Ramos. Favorable, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, item number 4. Just making note that we received and circulated Alona Giddings Community information. Moving on to item 4A. Councilman Conway?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This directly ties to this amendment would require that appeals manner originally approved that was sent out to everyone. All this has to do with incidents where there are changes to a property or proposed changes to a property and who gets to approve that. The original bill attempted to make that conditional by board.
Little louder, please.
Sure. The original bill attempted to make that conditional by board. This would propose that it would remain with the council.
Okay, and we also, before we vote on that, we also have another amendment. Aaron DeGraffenry, do you want to kind of explain that? This is from the President Mosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Conway explained what the amendment does. It makes it such that any subsequent change to a non-conforming use is going to have to get approval in the manner it was originally given authority. So if it came from the city council ordinance, the applicant will have to go to the city council to get that change approved. If they got approved at the BMZA, they'll have to go back to the BMZA.
So, Hillary, we have 2 separate amendments here on this transition rule. So, the committee needs to, I think, have a conversation of how, if there's questions. And, Tamara, you're saying it's 3
Right.
amendments?
Right. So the 4A, attachment 1 is the earlier version from Councilman Conway, which is the full version, which is not the new proposal that you actually discussed. So the attachment 1 that you have in your packet is not the 2 new ones. So you have to reconcile the 3 of them, the 3 versions.
So can we agree to strike attachment 1?
Yes, I believe that would be the correct way.
Yes, Aaron would help us work on that one and approve that one.
So then we have 2 more. Are we going, so we have to decide between the 2?
No, so the way that it was proposed, and I would look to you guys to figure out the best way to do it, is Councilman Conway introduced the full version, which is attachment 1. And then Council President Mosby introduces this particular sheet, which strikes a portion of attachment 1. And then there is the second sheet that comes from Councilman Conway, which is actually the new language. So if you, and this is just my kind of thinking through it, is if you strike all of attachment 1, then you don't actually need Council President Mosby's amendment because it's no longer there. And then you would just adopt Councilman Conway's new version, which is what people would want. Correct. It just circulated probably right before. I think that was in the packet that you gave out right before we started.
So did Aaron, did President Mosby strike any of his piece? In other words, which portion of Conway's did you put in President?
The most recent version with Councilman Conway's amendments that strike out the language in those 3 subsections is the best version.
Oh, I'm actually looking at the wrong one. I'm getting too confused. So ignore what I said about Council President Mosby. So you would actually still strike the amendment, the attachment 1, because that's the one, Councilman Conway, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the one that has the conditions in it that we're no longer wanting, correct?
So does Councilman Conway's amendment satisfy the president's amendment?
It's
It
the
does.
new Conway amendment.
Point, order. Shh. Tamara, there's another, is that this?
That's this one.
What is it titled October 25th?
Yes. Yes.
Councilman Conway, could you read your amendment, please?
It says amendment number 1 on page 8, strike beginning with by on line 8 down through appeals and line 9, and substitute in the manner of the original approval. And on the same page, strike beginning with by on line 16 down through and including appeals on line 17, substitute in the manner of the original approval. And on the same page, strike beginning with by on line 29 down through and including appeals on line 30, and substitute in the manner of the original approval.
So thank you, Councilman Conway, and this sounds like the one that need to vote on. And you need a copy,
I have Madam Chair,
the October 25th copy?
yes. We have copies of this now.
You have a question?
Yeah, so for clarification at this point, we're at present discussing that one or the other of these 2 amendments would be potentially adopted, but not both, right? Because they both amend the same page.
We're striking
extensively.
one and accepting the other.
And, okay, and since I'm just seeing both of these for the very first time,
They were sent.
I understand that this one was emailed today. I didn't see the one that was emailed. But regardless of that, I'm just trying to understand here that the intent of the 2 is more or less the same?
Yes.
And that is that any conditional use that was approved by ordinance would, if ever desired to be altered in any way at all would have to come back before the council with a whole new ordinance to alter the approved use at all, period?
Councilman Conway, if you want to explain, and then, Aaron, you can
Sure.
chime in.
The idea here is that you would have to revisit the method in which you were initially approved. So if you were initially approved by the board, you go back to the board. If you were initially approved by the council, you go back to the council.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll just say, that doesn't sound to me like it's in keeping with the general practice of allowing up to a certain percentage level change of an approved use to occur that can be approved by the zoning administrator or by the zoning board in different circumstances. It seems to me like it would be awfully cumbersome to have to come back to the city council if somebody wanted to reduce or expand the intensity of their use by like 10% if it was a conditional by ordinance use. Similarly with the BMZA, it seems like it would make an awful lot of sense to allow some leeway for approved uses to be altered, at least to some minimal percentage, without having to go through the entire ordinance process again. And I think that that's also what was submitted as commentary from the Baltimore Development Work Group as their issue with this amendment.
Point well taken. I make a motion to move Councilmember Conway.
Second.
Conway. Yes, go ahead. Explain your vote. Do you want to explain your
No,
vote?
I have a question. Usually when we have motions and seconds, we can do debate.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So if I understand this correctly, if there's a pre-existing permitted use or a non-conforming, which is the zoning got changed, that use stays, that, because there's not, sometimes the non-conforming is there because the zoning change happened, not necessarily that it was approved as a non-conforming. So, oh, I guess this says that if it's if it's a non-conforming use that's reclassified in some approval way, then if there needs to be any changes to it, it has to go back to the way that it was approved. Is that how you read that, Tamara, as well?
That is, yeah, that's correct. So essentially where you see in the current bill, must be approved by Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals, it would say instead in the manner of the original approval. We discussed instead of doing must be approved by Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals to make it conditional by ordinance, which would require everything to then come back to the council, which we wanted to sort of thread the needle here and not add an undue burden to folks. But realizing that there are sometimes instances in which there's a lot more sensitivity to the issue for which the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals is not going to do that due diligence to kind of chase down those issues. It's not really meant
Okay.
to consider some of that
Okay,
stuff.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor for, all those in favor?
Aye.
I can take a roll call. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock?
Yes.
Yes. Conway?
Yes.
Yes. Dorsey? No. Glover absent. Ramos?
Yes.
Yes, and Stokes? Hey, moving on. Now we're on number 5. Tamara, just your amendment number 2?
Oh, sure. So this is part of a suite amendment of amendments, and you'll see kind of duplicate language. But in this case, we're talking about the discretion to deny for variances to BMZA. And the language that we're actually proposing is that the executive director would have the discretion to deny an application for an appeal, if there is an outstanding violation that has not yet been cured with DHCD. The exception that we are putting in is if the appeal application would cure the violation, then that application could move forward. And so this is really to help curtail some of the concerns and issues that DHCD has faced over the last several years, where some applicants will actually not cure a violation, but instead start seeking to do new and additional things when they haven't actually cured what they've already, been fined for or received a notice for.
I make a motion to move. Second by, who was first? Ramos? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This amendment passes. Item number 6, planning amendment number 3. Tamara.
Sure. So this again is part of what we worked with DHCD on, and this is to clarify that we don't want to remove language that we have proposed to be removed in the actual legislation, but instead keep the language and just clarify that the executive director of BMZA would determine if a conditional use application or a signed application is complete. So that's just making sure that all their needs are met for the application process.
Councilman Glover has joined us, member of the committee. I make a motion to move. Second by Dorsey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Hearing none, this amendment is also approved. And number 7, we approved at the last hearing, work session, and also number 8. And now we're on number 9, planning amendment number 5.
Sure. Sure. This is, I mentioned before that we have a suite of amendments dealing with the discretion from page 6.
Page 6, planning amendment number 6.
And so this is part of the same amendment package that I just discussed on the discretion to deny. But this is just a different section that would have the same thing regarding code compliance and the executive director of BMZA and the discretion to deny processing an application for lack of code compliance or violation.
And just as a reminder for the group, we did have a hearing on this where we brought in Jeffrey Veal, talked about this as well extensively. And we also received some comments from the Baltimore Development Work Group. Second by Glover. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? This amendment passes. And item number, when we're on page 7 now, item number 10 and 11, we completed favorably at the last work session. So we're now on item number 12. And we do have some amendments.
Yeah,
Council members, president, and planning. Councilwoman Ramos, you want to?
I withdrew my amendment and
Oh.
we'll have work with the president's amendment.
Okay. Tamara, you have any comment?
Sure. So there's been substantial discussion about the ability to do outdoor dining in neighborhood commercial establishments. And the bill language that the Department of Planning has proposed is a bit more conservative, and I want to walk through a little bit. The first thing I'll just start off and say we have some level of disagreement. So this is one of the the pieces where Madam Chair in the beginning said there would need to be some discussion. So this is where we'll probably have to have a little discussion. So in our bill, we are proposing that outdoor dining be added as one of the available uses for neighborhood commercial establishments, which is in our residential zones. We all agree there, like we would like to add it, so that's fine. It's the where would you add it, which is the Department of Planning has taken a stance where we'd rather be really pretty conservative in that it would be on the street sides of the property. In our discussions, we have said that we would be okay if there were a buffer zone to have it on an interior side yard. But we also know that the council president would, and this is the amendment sheet that you have, that he would like to loosen that a little bit. And so we're not keen in the Department of Planning to having the outdoor dining in the rear yard or deck above the ground floor or rooftop. We have severe concerns, that it could present a nuisance issue to attached properties, and therefore cause enforcement issues. We have not had the benefit to really speak to, I'll say, our sister agency in DHCD to see, get their mindset or their thoughts on the enforcement side of things, because we don't do that piece of it. So we just wanted to kind of lay that out, and I'm not sure if Aaron DeGraffenreich from the council president's office would like to speak to
Yeah.
their amendment, and then, here for any questions or discussion.
As a matter of record, we striked Ramos's amendment, and she worked out an amendment together with the council president. Aaron, you want to talk about that amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as Tamara explained, the council president's amendment it seeks to allow, basically to allow the Board of Municipal Zoning Appeals to um, make this decision based on the conditional use standards that are going to apply for any neighborhood commercial establishment. So any restaurant that gets proposed in a residential zone will need to get approved by BMZA to make sure that it fits the neighborhood, is not a threat to public safety and the public interest, and things of that nature. So the council president's amendment wants to allow that same standard to apply to outdoor dining and deck and rooftop deck dining proposals in the residential zones. So one of the concerns that we've talked about with Tamara and others is, if a proprietor wants to propose a deck that would, potentially put patrons right next to a resident's bedroom or bathroom window, or otherwise be really encroaching on their privacy, the Board of Municipal Zoning Appeals can look at that fact on their own and deny that application. Or that neighbor or neighborhood association can oppose this proposal for that level of use. So that's what the council president's amendment wants to do, is to allow that same standard that applies for all neighborhood commercial establishments to apply to rooftop deck and second floor deck proposals as well.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos?
Yeah, just to add to that, we also put in a buffer because we don't want outdoor dining to be right next to somebody's house. So there's on both, the prohibition that you can't have it if it's, within the 10-foot right of way.
May I have a motion?
Do you mind if I ask a question,
Oh,
Madam Chair?
second by Ramos. Yes, question?
Yes, we're talking about the amendments from Councilmember Mosby right now.
Liam, try not to cut into a vote.
Oh, my apologies. You all are moving too fast for me. I did have a few questions about this. This is my first time seeing this today. Just looking at some of the things here, I do know there might be some concerns in some neighborhoods about allowing outdoor dining in the rear of properties and on the roof of properties. So, you know, I'm just wondering,
Well taken. All those in favor say aye.
I have a question.
Amendment moves.
I've never voted. I had a question.
Oh, question.
I wanted to Liam to explain what you were saying again for me first. Can he?
thank you, Councilman. And I know that the vote was just made, but um, it's just like, especially in some of the neighborhoods where there's a lot of restaurants in some of the historic neighborhoods, the restaurants are backing up oftentimes to residential properties. And if you have like a situation where it's a multi-million-dollar restaurant or bar establishment, allowing that outdoor dining area in the backyard, it could be almost a nightclub essentially to 2 a.m. Depending on how the setup is. So I'm just sharing that as like a word of caution.
Thank
you know.
thank you. Tamara, do you have a comment?
Sure. Just a couple of points of clarification. This particular amendment only deals with neighborhood commercial establishments, which are in the residential zones, not the commercial zones. And also the way the language is written in the amendment, this is not a buffer. So there is no buffer in this language, actually. So the language only speaks to right of way. So this is really saying which, like what the bucket of properties are that would be included. So the minute you're saying where there's a 10-foot right-of-way, this is only identifying properties that have that. This isn't speaking to properties that may not have that. You know, I mean, it's up to the council at this point. I think the Department of Planning and, you know, from DOT, some of the concerns that we have, but we just wanted to lay these particular things out. We do understand and agree, you know, that the nature of a neighborhood commercial establishment is going to be MZA regardless. So just understand that, you know, when you adopt this language, then it is going to be incumbent upon, you know, that really strong input at BMZA. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that.
Well, thank you, Liam and Tamara, and my vote is yes. Want to explain?
Sure. So we're on page 7, number 13, line 13. Well, no, 13 is different. No, you did 12.
Well,
12 was withdrawn, and that's the one that deals with NCEs. Outdoor dining 13 is actually the next section in the code that deals with the outdoor dining would be allowed, including the reallocation of parking spaces. This is the amendment that actually speaks to the non-residential zones and kind of the, you know, all of the different pieces. So this one's a little bit more robust. So 13 is where we talk about, you know, kind of codifying the design for distancing, where people were able to reallocate parking spaces for outdoor dining. And we talk about the ability to do rooftop dining in the non-residential zones, and that they would be conditional there for rooftops. So the difference is that in some of our commercial zones, outdoor dining is already a permitted use. So this section is just clarifying with more detail the ways in which you could do the outdoor dining.
this one? 13, item 13.
No, it's like 8,
Yes,
number 13, planning and-
but item 13, that includes them all on page 7. Page 7, item 13.
Second.
Second by Dorsey. Thank you. All in favor? Code amendment moves forward. And we also received an attached letter that was circulated for several weeks through the committee from Joan Floyd and Carol Holzer. To make that a matter of record. And also, we're now on page 8, item 15, favorable at the last session. So now we're on item 16, page 8, that we, an amendment here. And, before we have an amendment from Councilman Dorsey, before we do that, could you explain the definition of carriage house for the committee?
Sure, and I'm trying to scroll through it really pretty quickly here, almost there.
But,
It-
yeah, we're on carriage houses.
Yes.
So
Go ahead, you can.
thank you, Madam Chair. At the last session, we adopted Councilwoman Ramos's amendment, which is number 15 on the sheet, which addressed the parking space related to carriage houses. My amendment originally had that included in it as well as this other provision.
So item 15 passed,
Yes.
I had
And-
mentioned.
Yeah, so my original amendment incorporated that in it as well. So once we adopted that, I changed my amendment to just have the other element of it, which is the square footage of the unit. This square footage, I'm sorry, I'm being confusing.
It's okay.
My
But I
amendment-
just wanted Tamara just to give a definition of carriage houses.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
We're
So you can give a
kind of-
definition of carriage house, that's fine.
Okay, hold tight,
Okay, great. Sorry.
stay calm.
I was reading 3 different documents while you were asking her a question. I didn't know what was happening.
No, thank you. You gave me time to scroll through it.
Yeah.
I bought her time.
You bought me
I'm
time.
useful, I promise.
So carriage house, per the zoning code means an accessory structure of 2-story construction that was formerly used or intended to be used for the storage of horses and carriages.
Thank you. You can continue.
Thank you. Madam Chair, in practice, these things are quite small, generally speaking. And 750 square feet is essentially an arbitrary number that was assigned to it at some point in the past. It's out of keeping with national standards to require auxiliary or accessory housing like this to have such large square footages. And this number of 350 square feet, in fact, comes from the building code, which we have already adopted. This is simply conforming the zoning code with our building code, which says that it's perfectly possible to meet standards for safety and health adequacy in a dwelling unit in as little as 350 square feet. It can be challenging to fit everything into 350 square feet. So more commonly, what you see is 400 or 450, but it is possible and permissible by our housing code. And so this just makes our zoning code conform with our building code.
So, there's been discussion about the tiny house concept and so on. I don't know how this relates and if, when I first, and this is just conversation.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know if this is going to affect that. That we need to have more dialogue and input with community about that particular subject. So how does this relate to that, if it relates at all?
It's tangential at best. What we're talking about here are buildings that already exist in the city that historically were constructed for the purpose of dwelling and which we have made next to impossible to legally occupy as dwelling through some arbitrary rulemaking over time that's ahistoric in nature. Where it does dovetail with the idea of tiny homes is that there are certain people who bring up tiny homes very readily in the context of something that you could put in the back of a bigger house. Just generally speaking, But these are things that already exist in the back of houses. And for this matter, we already have dwelling units of this small size permitted in the city in much denser buildings of high-density apartment buildings. So we already have units in this city of this small size, and we already have these units in the back of people's houses. We're just making it impossible for people to occupy this housing legally, while it is actually already being occupied in many cases illegally. And so we're just codifying, again, a square footage minimum
Do I have
in
a
the zoning code. So I move it favorable, please.
Ramos, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and 17, 18, we moved, well, we withdrew 18, but item 17, we moved favorable. So we're now on page 9 of our document number, item number 19. Bikes.
Sure. So you'll see several amendments to bikes, that are coming up. So when we started, kind of drafting this bill, we were trying to align to standards within the Department of Transportation. And as we were, going through the amendments and meeting with groups like Bike More and other associations, we just really began to kind of talk through exactly what does this mean. And in some cases, we don't need to have language that aligns necessarily to DOT, because we want to give them latitude to do programs how they need to do programs, which is extremely critical. So 19 is the bike parking space size, and the space size that we have in, which I believe is the 2x6, is actually suitable for us. So we would prefer to delete any proposed language in that particular section and keep it as is.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Dorsey, second, Ramos, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. This amendment passes. Item number 20, bike parking floor racks.
Sure. So again, in talking about the way that the code requires bicycle parking, that you have long-term and short-term bike parking, and the long-term is usually within the building. So that's how we work with developers that may come. And in that, they have to actually show on their floor plans where the bike room is. They have to dimension it like a regular parking space. So this particular section, as you can imagine, that's kind of possible leasable square footage. So they're not often wanting to allocate that much space to ground-mounted floor racks. So what we did is we went back and kind of re-looked at this particular section that says, okay, you could have a percentage if you're doing new construction that would be allocated to ground floor bike racks versus wall mounted. And then we up the percentage if you're doing a reuse project, because that's an existing building, to say that you could have a higher percentage of the wall mounted, because you're not necessarily reconfiguring the interior of your floor the same way.
To move the floor rack amendment. Second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye. This amendment passes. And then it's item 21, long-term bike parking standard.
Sure. So again, in our suite of trying to figure out the best way to deal with bicycle parking, originally, we were definitely planning to say that the bike parking needed to be in kind of clear view in a room and all of these different things. But I believe this was a conversation that maybe was had with you, Councilman Dorsey, with one of my colleagues, surrounding, what about event parking at stadiums and, different things like that, where it's not feasible to have everything in a bicycle room or, within clear view. So what we did is we went through to modify this particular section to say, under certain circumstances, you can have this short-term bicycle parking that is not necessarily in a room. So it may just be, on outdoor plaza space or something like that.
Move for the second. All those in favor say aye. Nay. This amendment passes. Now we're on page 10, item 22. And there's a amendment from Ramos. All right.
So the chart that you see in my package of amendments it's actually page 59 in the chart. Excuse me, in the table.
This chart is being swapped by the planning department
Correct.
chart.
There was a typo in our chart.
I guess we don't, is there a motion to move? By Conway?
Second.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. We're on 23, cargo bike station.
Let's vote.
Oh, well, I'm really moving. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. That amendment has been approved. Now the cargo bike spaces.
Sure. So originally we have 2 feet by 8 feet, but we wanted to change it by 4 feet to 4 feet by 9 feet. Those bicycles are generally, the cargo portion is wider. So they need a bit more room and longer. They need a bit more room to maneuver, within the bicycle room.
Conway, second. Second by Ramos. All those in favor say aye. Nay. This amendment moves. We're now on item 24, bike parking space design standard.
Sure. So this ties with amendment number 22. Our amendment actually places the table in the bill because we referenced it but never actually did the table. So we would need to have it inserted, I guess, and then we would have number 22 swap it out.
A motion, second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes. This amendment passes. And now we're on item 25, sign special rules.
Sure. So we have several amendments in for Title 17, which is the sign title in the zoning code. And, I don't know, Councilman Costello, if you wanted to run through it, or did you want me to run through it? Okay.
Costello has an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd like to defer to Tamara. Her team has been just phenomenal to work with throughout this process. So I think she's going to do a much more effective and briefer job of explaining it than I will.
Thank you. Mary, you're on.
Sure. So again, we have this suite of amendments, and in working with Councilman Costello and a property owner in the C1 zoning district, what we found is there, in this, the reason we're okay with having this amendment in is because it is a condition that happens around the city. On occasion, in our C1 zoning districts and in C2s, we will have properties that are actually much larger than what we anticipated or what the actual district is meant to be. So in the case of C1, for example, that's usually like our main streets and kind of these smaller commercial, properties. But on occasion, you will have some that are full blocks. And we did not make allowances for signage that might be in a C1 district that is a full block. And so what we did is work with Councilman Costello to come up with language that would allow for these larger properties to split. And this is the way we do it with wall signage in, already, that we would allow them to kind of split their allotment of wall signage on the building. And what this does is it doesn't change the base allotment. So if you have a 15-foot wide row house commercial building, they still get the same allotment. So there won't be the danger of over signage that we often hear about, but it does accommodate the ability to do these larger buildings that often require a little bit more, flexibility.
Say aye. Item 25, amendment. Now moving to page 11, item 26, which is also special rules.
Sure. Sure, this is a little bit of an expansion of the amendment that we just talked about, but a different section of the code. This applies to R8 through R10 and OR2. Currently in the zoning code, if you're in one of these zoning districts and have 50 units or more, you can take a percentage of your gross floor area and allocate that to commercial use. When we were writing the code, we didn't actually take that into account when we were allowing for signage in residential districts. So the signage amount that you actually see currently in the code is as if it were a house or something like that. So what this amendment will do is for those developments that are taking advantage of this 50 units or more and doing, ground floor retail, they could tie into the C1 zoning, which is kind of the least amount when you come to the commercial zoning. So it would still fit into a residential character. So this amendment is really very specific to those that are taking advantage of a portion of the zoning code that already exists.
Second by Ramos. All those in favor, say aye. This amendment. Any nays? This amendment moves, sorry. Still on 11, item 27,
Sure.
signs. There's some other Costello amendment.
Yes. So did you want me to, Councilman, to continue with that? Okay, so on item 27, electronic signs, this particular amendment is dealing with the larger electronic signs and what we call open structural framework signs. These are signs that theoretically could go on like an exoskeleton of a building or the structural framework. That's what you see basically as like the canopy on the convention center, as you're driving along Pratt, is it has the kind of structural membrane. Oftentimes right now you will see them hang kind of the who's coming, what conference is coming or different things like that. That's an example of an open structural framework. So this would allow for these particular types of structures to get the digital signs, and the size of these are really the larger ones. So they're only going to be allowed through an area of special signage control, which is in the case of downtown was established via ordinance in the plan adopted by Planning Commission. So these have a bit more scrutiny to them. It's just allowing this particular structure and sign type to be used.
Thank you. We do have a, explain the president amendment, was there dialogue?
These are totally different sections. Correct.
Okay, is there a motion to, any discussion? Is there a motion to move? Sullivan, so moved by Stokes, second. By Middleton. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then we have, President's Amendment. That's with a separate section that you haven't talked about yet.
Correct. It's,
They were passed, they're on the desk. No problem. So you can,
would you like me to walk through it? Sure. So currently in the bill on page 46 of the bill, and it's lines 18 and 19 in 17407, which is again the sign code, we are proposing language that says in residential zoning districts R1A through R10 for all uses allowed in the institutional use category. So just to explain what that is, just to kind of refamiliarize you with the context, is if you recall, we are adding in the ability to do the smaller electronic signs to the residential zoning categories as a conditional use or conditional to the board. And through, kind of more discussions with the council president, there was some concern, especially because the residential zoning categories, the building typologies are broad. So what we did is we had the conversation with the council president and came up with language, and what you have on your sheet are actually two things. And I'll start with the bottom one, which is to add to say that they're allowed in institutional use category on lots with a minimum of both 30 feet of building frontage and 7,500, that should be a comma, of square feet of lot area. So that's just, kind of curtailing where these could go. And that is in what we call the where allowed section. The second piece is adding to language that's already in the zoning code. So 17204D, we have illumination requirements, and it says unless otherwise provided in this title, all signs. But the council president wanted to be clear that all signs were explicit to including electronic signs. And so that's what we're, are supportive in being added.
add anything to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, Tamara nailed it, as usual.
Thank you. I guess just an added thing, this helps.
Correct.
Part of the reasoning as well. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, point of order, it's not properly prepared in DLR, by DLR. Do you want to do it on second reader?
This is something that we can do on second reader for the format. Is, Hillary, is that what you were gonna?
Yes, you can give it the better formatted.
That's the, precedents that we have been following. So yes, this will be put on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the amendment. I just want to follow our normal protocol.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for, that call. Do I have a motion to? Can we vote on this?
Yes.
Yes. We can vote on this now, and then when it comes, I make a motion to move. Do I have a second? Second from Conway. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Opposition? So this will be formatted and ready for second reader, and if not, then we're gonna hold. Can recall it, in other words. Okay, moving on page 12, item 28.
Sure, sure. So this particular amendment is, again, with the suite of amendments from Councilman Costello, that's needed to kind of deal with the larger buildings in the C1 zoning category. And the note that it's roof signs is incorrect. It's actually dealing with wall signs. So what we're talking about are, again, in the C1 and C1E zoning districts, wall signs above the ground floor are only allowed on buildings with a building frontage of 30 feet or wider. So if you remember a few minutes ago, where I talked about the kinds of buildings that are often found in our C1 zoning districts that are usually smaller, Main Street, more narrow. This is the amendment that basically protects those buildings by qualifying and saying that the larger ones, which have the frontage of 30 feet or wider, can take advantage of, this kind of expanded ability.
Second. Favor? Hearing none, this amendment. Okay, item 29 voted on favorable at the last session. That was determination of nonconformity. And now we're on item 30, expiration of approval, which I think is also connected to item 31 and 32.
Correct.
Still have to- Okay.
Sure, but I can walk through. So when we discussed the bill language, maybe a couple of work sessions ago, we had a lot of, comments and concerns and discussions from both Councilman Dorsey and Councilwoman Ramos. So, we all went back, and I say we, Law Department, Aaron and DHCD, the council members, planning, we all kind of huddled BMZA to really talk about this particular issue from the vantage point of both council people, which were different scenarios. And what we were able to do, while we were not able, I'll start off, to reach conclusion for the concern from Councilwoman Ramos, we were able to reach conclusion for the concern from Councilman Dorsey, which actually dealt with in some cases, they're long-standing vacant multifamily buildings that were actually built as multifamily buildings in our lower density residential zones. So they've become non-conforming by virtue of the way that we wrote Transform Baltimore. And so they have no ability to reestablish. So the language that we have that you see in red, the lowercase is the bill language that talks about the expiration of approval, but then you'll see in caps that reestablish, which ties to the next pieces that we'll talk about. So in this particular piece, we are saying that any authorization to reestablish or continue. So because we already have bill language that speaks about the continuation of nonconforming, we're saying the expiration of approval would also go towards those that are being reestablished.
Separately, so, yes.
To that point, Madam Chair, items 30, 31, and 32 are just parsed out partial explanations of the same amendment. Planning Exhibit H, number 3. So it would make sense to just cover.
Just verify with the law.
Yeah.
Can we do one vote amendment on all three of those? Okay. Is there a motion for item 30, 31, and 32?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Hearing none, so item 30, 31, and 32 is taken care of. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
One second. So, before we move to the next one, so Councilman Conway would like to, and I guess it's Hillary, to follow this. Councilman Conway would like to change his vote on number 13 for reconsideration. Councilman Conway, want to move for reconsideration? Want to explain?
Yeah, I'd like to change my vote on item number 13, which is planning amendments number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. I want to change that to a no, so I want to move that we can reconsider that vote. That's okay.
Is there a motion to reconsider?
So move.
So moved by Conway, second by Middleton. So let's go back to, oh, we got to vote on the reconsideration. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? How many do not want to reconsider? Let's take a roll call. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Conway?
Yes.
Yes. Dorsey?
No.
No. Glover? Yes. Ramos? Yes. Stokes? Yes. So now we can reconsider.
Madam Chair, I want to move item number 13, planning amendments 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Okay, let me go back to, just look at this here. So it's item number 13.
Yep.
And that was the plan, and you want to change your vote? No.
Yep.
Your vote. Do I have a motion to make this no change? Do I have a motion to move the item?
So move.
So moved by Conway, second by Ramos. Do we vote? Let's do a roll call vote again for his change to no. So, and that's in agreement. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock is a yes. Conway is a yes. Yes to a no. Dorsey? Dorsey is a yes. Okay. Glover is a yes. Ramos is a yes. And Stokes is a yes. Okay. You're welcome. Now, let's get back to so now we're on, so we finished with items 30, 31, and 32, correct?
Yep.
So now we're starting item 33.
Okay, so item 33, in the bill, we proposed that parking lots would become a permitted use in the open space zone. But through, a lot of discussion prior to planning commission, we agreed that we would delete that and let it remain conditional, use by ordinance.
So was this also? Yes.
Madam Chair, I had, my original amendment number 5 had both the parking on parks and wireless on as conditional by board. And so what the conversation that we had with planning was that we would pass theirs that has the conditional by, I'm sorry, it was conditional by ordinance. That we would have conditional by ordinance for them. And then I did a separate amendment, which came out very late, mostly my fault, to have a separate amendment for wireless to be conditional by ordinance. There'll be two separate,
Do we have that amendment?
no, yeah, I have it here because it came late. It's, again, my fault. And I have one copy here.
So we want to, that's going to be another one that we're going to have to formulate.
It's
So-
here, it's formulated properly, it's just not circulated to everybody. I don't have staff here to make the copies.
And while that's being shared, Aaron, did you want to speak on this? Is there any, I'm trying to think, was there an amendment from the president as well?
No.
No, there was no amendment from the president's office on this topic.
Madam Chair, if I could, to change, while we're waiting on copies of that, I need to, one of the next amendments we're going to look at is the bicycle parking angle dimensions. And we had voted on what I thought that's what.
Sorry, where are you at now?
Yep. So let me just back up. On page, okay, so on page 10 of the chart, we had voted on item number 22. The chart said, the table says that there's a chart, and I have to say that my amendment number 4 was not the chart. It was actually changing the measure, making sure that there were outlets for electronic bikes. And the chart is actually amendment number 5, the new amendment number 5, which is item 39. So technically, we already voted on item 39
It's just that it was put in a different
in a
place.
different order. Yep, that's exactly right. So I didn't.
But it's the same subject and we voted on it, correct?
So we voted, so technically we voted on item 39 because that was the chart that planning and I had agreed on. But we didn't end up voting on this other amendment number 4, which everybody will get. It's the same amendment that I've had, which is, it doesn't adjust bicycle parking spaces. It actually says that each space would have an outlet.
Okay,
For the note, that was my
okay.
error.
Just a recess for 1 minute while copies are being made of this one amendment.
Thank you,
We're
Madam
we're
Chair.
in recess. Oh, it's quick. She's coming back already. Oh, okay. So, okay, let's wait till we get those amendments. And then we'll move to your other item that you
Okay,
want
great.
us to talk about, so we're not confused. And we're getting down to the wire here. So we only have about 4 more amendments kind of after this. So hold on, recess for 1 minute.
Mhm. That's right, we want to. Wrong chart. 33. Right. Okay. That's like the community. Right. 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 Okay. Sorry. So what we did here was put. Yeah.
Is this what she just did? Okay.
Thank you.
That's a problem. So we're back.
Madam Chair, we were just looking at this and I realized that there is a mistake in the amendment. So if you don't mind, we're going to have to work on this on second reader or,
I added to the,
yeah.
okay.
And I'll make sure that all the committee members have that.
But
But
we-
the item 33, we should go ahead and vote on. It's item 34 that will have to be modified. on.
Work it out and we'll get it ready. Okay, and we'll vote on it then.
Yep.
Okay. So, one sec. So we're on 33. Okay.
Sure. So do you want me to walk back through it? I think I walked through it. I can.
Okay. Just quickly walk back through it first. just to
Sure.
Get everybody
Sure.
on the same page.
Sure. So in our bill, we proposed, that parking lots become a permitted use in open space zones. But through the discussions and kind of outcry, from the public, that we agreed to leave it as is, which is conditional use by ordinance.
Okay, so for number 30, we're going to take a vote on number 33, and then, my understanding, Councilwoman Ramos has to correct her amendments.
Correct.
So,
It's 34, so we wouldn't vote on 34, but we would vote.
so your thing is connected to 34.
34, correct.
Okay. Is Aaron on here? So I have a note here. Was there any discussion or a comment from the president's office on 33?
No, Madam Vice President, the council president did not have anything to amend or add or edit on 33.
Okay. Moving forward, is there a motion to move?
Second.
Moved by Dorsey, second by Ramos, and that was item 33. 14. All those in favor say aye. Any nays? This move. Second reading. Second, I need some more amendment voting records. Now, item 34. Okay, item 34, permitted parking in open space.
So that one we're holding.
And that's the one that we're going to correct and take care of at second reader. Make note of that. Now we're on page 15, number 35, we voted on favorably. At the last meeting, we still have 35A hanging, and that was, I have here amendment number 3, Dorsey. And that was commercial districts, bulk and yard regulation.
Sorry, I'm tracking this here. Right, thank you, Madam Chair. This is the amendment to the building heights, which are currently set at 60 feet. There was an explanation submitted that explains that in order to construct buildings of 5 stories, 60 feet is not quite enough. At some point, there was a discussion between the development work group about going to 65, and planning was fine with that. And then the development work group said, actually, we've done the calculations and 65 isn't quite enough. We actually need 68 to fit in everything related to 5 floors and the parapet on the front of the building, basically. So this just changes the existing table from a 60-foot building height to a 68-foot building height. I move the amendment.
And we do, just want to make note that we do have, the committee does have comments from the Baltimore Development Work Group. And I didn't know if Tamara wanted to add anything.
No, I think Councilman covered it.
Okay, so we have a motion. Dorsey, is there a second? Second by Glover? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? This amendment passes. Okay, item 36, 37, and 38 were voted on at the last session, and they were all favorable. We're now on 39, which is the bike parking angles and dimensions.
Yep, Madam Chair, this is what I was mentioning before. We actually passed this already. It was that table that's attached to what was just given to you in terms of the table for the size of parking. What we didn't vote on, and again, I didn't realize it until after we had dealt with this, is that on the chart, number 22, that should actually not be long-term bike parking standards. It's about the electrical outlets that need to have for electric bikes.
Okay, so,
So technically, we already voted on number 39 and just need to go ahead and vote on item 22, which is on the chart, it says amendment 4, but it's actually amendment 3, just because I had just sent out copies.
okay, sorry, paper.
I know, it's a lot of paper. Mary, you can verify?
Sure. You're talking about amendment number 3 on page 2 of the copies that we just
Right,
received.
which is the one that would have, that's about the parking,
The ones you just gave copies of.
it's actually amendment, on the chart, it says amendment 4, but it is amendment 3 in this new packet.
Is this something else that has to be corrected?
No, I think the amendment is fine. It's just that we didn't talk about it or vote on it. Because I didn't realize that in the chart, it was the chart that we're looking at, page 10, referred to another chart, which was my other amendment, which we already voted on. So this would be the making sure that each, in long-term bike parking, that each space must have an electrical outlet.
There a motion to approve?
So move.
Yes.
It's her amendment. So we're on,
We're trying to.
so on page 10 of your chart, line 22, the way that it's worded is we mistakenly thought it was the table 16701, but in actuality, it's amendment number 3 from Councilwoman Ramos's submission. So when you voted on that one,
Make sure we getting it right. Yeah. Is it new language that you're just admitting?
Yes, to the parking spaces for the bikes. No, the table. And in the chart, it says. Chart, which is not.
What we actually voted on. Now, we took care of the chart.
No, I understand, but I didn't realize it until, but recommend, this is actually amendment 5. We voted on it.
We voted on the chart, so
We
we
didn't
now
vote on
need to
it.
vote on the. Okay. So we're voting on amendment number 3. Okay.
And it basically allows for,
Yes.
just allows for long-term bike parking to have outlets. Because some people may have chronic bike. Five is down.
Just want to make sure we get it right in the writing.
Right, but we can work it out then. I just.
Okay, so now we just have to vote on 3. Okay, let's start on that amendment number 3 for page 31.
We have a motion already in a second.
Who did the motion? Who gave the motion? I need the name.
Oh, it was mine.
Motion by Ramos, second. Before we move, there is asked to explain this one.
Sure thing. And again, apologies for the mix-up. What this does is basically say for areas where there's long-term bike parking, that there should be electrical outlets because some bikes are going to be, electrical bikes.
Can, just for clarity for the record, can you just read the amendment? Just so we make sure we're all,
Oh, in terms
is
of
that
how.
okay, Madam Chair?
Didn't hear you.
Is it okay,
Conway.
is it okay if she just reads the amendment? It's 3 lines, but I think it would be helpful just for clarity. Because it's amendment number 3, right? On the handout, yeah.
So there seems to be some confusion still. So my suggestion is to kind of get this, this is something else we can vote on again at second read. Remember, we had a lot of amendments, so let's get this together before we vote on it and add it to the other piece.
I don't want to hold it up. I just want to make, so on page 31, in line 7, there must be inadequate electrical outlets and substitute each space must have an electrical outlets. And on the same page in line 9, strike 2 and 8 respectively and substitute with 4 and 9 respectively. That's what we're voting on.
Yeah, so basically what it does is it says in line 7, there must be adequate electrical outlets. And each space must have an electrical outlet. And then on the same page, line 9, strike 2 and 8 and put in 4 and 9, which is consistent with the dimensions of the bike parking.
My suggestion is to get this, I want us to wait and vote on this, because as I'm thinking about businesses, and would this be requiring all businesses to adhere by this? This change?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Dorsey. I just want to make sure that we're not putting,
It's,
right, and that this is an anti-business. I just want to make sure.
yeah, no, Madam Chair, we already have pretty extensive and widely accepted bicycle parking regulations that, that we all, I think, have already supported here and in fact increase in intensity to some degree through other amendments. This one just says that 10% of the, or the family-sized bikes have to, bike parking stations, which makes up a minimum number of the bike parking spaces in the first place, have to have an electrical outlet. So if you had a development that was so big that you had to have 10 family bike, like cargo bike stations, which is a cut above and beyond certain other bike parking stations. If you had 10 of them, which would be an extraordinary number, you would only have to have one electrical outlet. And e-bikes are just so prevalent at this point and being used all over the city and in cities all over the place. This is just like a really, really simple provision to slip in where somebody is already doing so much more to accommodate bicycle parking. So it's really a minimal change.
Councilman Stokes has a question.
I just have a question. Is this the same requirement we do with electrical cars in terms of those?
I can't speak to that. I can, either Councilman Dorsey or
DOT, you comment?
It's not an apples to apples comparison, but with electric vehicles, like cars, we are increasingly looking to expand that charging infrastructure. And I know that to Councilwoman Ramos's point and Councilman Dorsey's point, the proliferation of e-bikes, that's something that's also expanding. And I think for a city like Baltimore City, one of the reasons why that's critical is because, believe it or not, we're actually one of the hilliest major cities in the United States. And that's why like more and more people are turning to e-bikes. It's kind of opens the accessibility of biking to people.
And Madam Chair, just to add that if you look at the actual page 31, it's clear that it's in instances where there's 9 long-term biking, 10% of those, 9 or more, only 10% have to be, have to have electrical outlets. So this is if you have a lot of spaces, and there's 10% of them that have to have spaces, not every single one.
And how are you thinking of the cost of, how,
Well, considering that a lot of parking spaces now have the EV chargers for the cars, going back to the councilman's question, that in these, it's actually a plug. It's not actually a special thing. You just plug it in with an adapter that the person who has an e-bike would have.
so as DOT stated, it's a completely different.
Madam Chair, sorry.
DOT,
So it's different in the sense of like, where a bike storage might be in a room in a building, right? Whereas if you're parking a vehicle, it's going to be like a garage. It's going to be a entire floor of parking. It sounds like what this amendment would do is just have an outlet or two be placed within proximity to the bike parking.
so does it make the business owner spend extra money?
No.
Answer.
It's probably minimal. It could be like, I mean, it could be just like, it could be nothing extra if they already were planning an outlet in the room. It could be an additional outlet, but we're talking,
This we need to hear.
Yeah, this is like you're spending literally millions of dollars to build a building, and it's about spending $3 for another electrical receptacle and $10 on some wire and 20 minutes of an electrician's time on a building that's, and then drawing enough current maybe to power a lamp.
Okay, that's what we needed to hear.
I just have a question.
Councilman Stokes?
Who installs the outlet? Who is the business of responsibility, DOT? Who installs?
So when it's a private property and let's say a new apartment is being built, it's going to be whoever the general contractor is. And I know that
we have Stephanie Murdoch here, and I actually recently had a conversation with Jason Hessler about EV chargers. And I know that the city's standards require a master electrician. So these will be very competent, people with expertise in doing this type of work. But it would be on the private, building owner or developer.
Need more conversation? And so we had a motion and a second. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that moves. But we like it to, whatever needs to be corrected, please get this corrected. Okay, we got all that cleared up. Now are we 39? Are we still on 39? We're now on 40. And we have 40 and 41. Okay, 40, light industrial bike parking. Tamara.
Sure. So we inadvertently left bike parking requirements out of light industrial. So we are proposing to add them in to the table, and we would mimic those for industrial warehouse, which are long-term one per 5,000 square feet of gross floor area, and short-term would be the same. So that's the amendment.
Make a motion to move. I got a second.
Second.
Second over here, Conway was first. All those in favor say aye. That moves to. And down to the last one. I can't believe it. 41, sign regulations.
We can finish this by 4:00.
All right. Sign regulations, and I know Costello Amendment 4 and 5 was with us. Go ahead, he's relying on Tamara to,
Sure. So this is a continuation of the suite of amendments to allow for the more permissive signage for the larger C1 properties. So we did all the text amendments, so now we have to put it in the table. The way Table 17201 is set up in these particular zoning categories, you have ground floor and above ground floor wall signage as one. So this amendment would actually split them. So you would have an allotment for ground floor and then a second allotment for above ground floor. And that's what allows the larger buildings to tap into the amount for the above ground floor.
do I get a motion to move? So moved by Dorsey, second by Bullock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? This amendment moves. And now let's vote on the bill as
Madam-
amended.
Madam Chair?
Getting excited here.
I know, me too. I'll try to be brief.
Oh, that's right. We have one more.
So one more amendment, and I don't have this drafted, but I've discussed it with planning, discussed it with law as well. Excuse me. I've discussed it with planning. I've discussed it with law as well. It's not drafted yet, but we'll have it for second reader. And the decision is to only allow crematories in I2 and I1 and I2. And the reason behind that is, of course, right now they are able to be abutting residential areas in commercial districts where you have places where you eat and otherwise. So that's what we're proposing. It'd be conditional by board. And we have a definition, which I'm happy to read, but I want to allow Tamara to explain a little bit about the changes that will actually be in the code as a result of that change.
Okay, so, Tamara, did you have some added comments?
Sure, just to talk a little bit about the structure, and we'll await, the text, how you would like to read it. But basically, right now, you have funeral homes, and the definition of funeral homes includes crematorium. So what would happen is the definition of funeral home would change to exclude crematorium, and then there would be a new definition, which the councilman spoke to, for crematorium. And by splitting them, that allows them in the table to become their own uses. So what would happen, that's the text change, And in the table, you would add a new use for crematorium in table 11301. And once that use is actually added, then you would go under the columns for I-1 and I-2, which is where you're proposing it, and put CB, which would be conditional to the board. And the other piece that you would want to check is just make sure that all the bulk regulations, if there are any changes that need to happen there. So that's the general structure that would need to happen.
Thank you.
So, Councilman Conway's going to put the writing
I-
together for us to vote on for second reader, along with a few of the other things that we're going to be doing for second reader.
Madam Chair, if folks are okay with it, I would like to move it now, and I did talk to Hillary earlier. Is this okay to move?
Any pleasure for comments? Councilman Dorsey.
I don't have a problem with a verbal.
Okay, another comment from
I,
Stu.
I know Chairman Conway had conversation with some of the funeral directors in my district, but I have not. Even if they support it, they don't, I have not had a conversation with them about this myself. I know he did have some conversations with, I believe, one of the funeral homes in the district. Can you,
Sure.
comment on it?
I spoke to three
Mark.
funeral homes, three of the largest ones here in the city, and got their feedback on it. The long and short of those conversations is, of course, they would love to be able to put crematories everywhere. They also do understand some of the concerns that folks in our neighborhoods had with having to breathe in crematory burn-off. And also the challenges that it may provide to businesses. That said, initially the discussion was a prohibition, an outright prohibition of crematories in the city. And ultimately decided that industrial was a reasonable place to do so, because by and large, largely it stays away from residential and commercial areas. There are some examples where it is close to residential or budding residential, and that's where condition by board is going to be especially relevant. But otherwise, in our industrial areas, the pollution that may be coming from these crematoriums is going to be a drop in a bucket compared to what's already coming from the industrial area.
Any other conversation? Councilman Dorsey.
All right, so, Councilmember Conway, my understanding is you're proposing essentially two things, and my question is, are you proposing them as one amendment or two? You're proposing to prohibit crematoria in commercial districts
Yes.
and allow it where it is not presently allowed in industrial districts.
Yes.
My concern with this is not in the former, but in the latter. I have no problem prohibiting them in commercial districts, but I have a big problem with pushing more incineration onto the neighborhoods that exist adjacent to industrial land. Curtis Bay and Brooklyn and South Baltimore neighborhoods have already seen enough of this, and this would push it onto potentially industrial properties that exist in the middle of Park Heights still today, and other places. I think Remington has some industrial districts. I have absolutely no problem with supporting a prohibition in commercial spaces, but we can't create new opportunity for incineration to oppress those neighborhoods that happen to be adjacent to industrial areas. There are huge plumes that exist as a result of kind of the fallout of burning, and burning human bodies is one of the most filthy things that we could be doing in any neighborhood or adjacent to it. So if you were proposing these as two separate amendments, I would be inclined to make a motion on the former, but not on the latter.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councilman.
Any other comment? Yes,
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilman Conway. I will say, hearing my colleague, Councilman Dorsey's point of view. Again, that I think it's a critical point in terms of the industrial piece, but I'm glad we had the conversation as well, just for everyone else, that current ones would be grandfathered in. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know there's some existing businesses that that operate in that regard. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that as well.
Councilman Stokes.
Chairman Conway, I had asked him that question too about industrial and how much feet and moving it from one area to another when it's kind of concerning for me right now.
So it sounds like with conversation that,
And I can present it as two separate amendments. I'm happy to do that, yeah.
okay, and they're, that will be prepared for a second reader.
Sure.
I, are we gonna, so are
Madam
we
Chair.
gonna vote on one or none? Or we
I,
rather wait until we get both, like,
I would rather wait to see it.
and it seems like that's the consensus, to have both
I'm fine with that.
then brought to the council floor.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, now we can move on to the bill as amendment.
Madam Chair, just
Oh.
point of order, I think we didn't vote on number one because we have to, we need to go back to it and.
Correct.
because all the,
Oh, you are right. Absolutely right.
I don't know if we, it's just
The,
yellow.
the general provisions, you're saying we got to go back.
Well, Madam Chair, my question was
All I
whether,
got to do is ask for a motion to approve.
well, my question was whether or not we have to go back, and I guess it's for the law department, since we did so many changes. Do we need, no? Oh, we don't have to, oh, okay. Okay. Got it, never mind.
So we just need a motion to
So moved.
technical, motion to approve for the technical amendment. So by Conway and second by Ramos. Now, we need, I want to take a vote on the bill as amended.
We
I
didn't,
thought,
we didn't vote on the First Amendment.
skip the A.
Moving too fast.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Hallelujah.
Ayes, hearing none, that amendment moves. Now we can vote on the bill as amended.
Seconded very much so.
Dorsey? Say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none, so there are a number of, not a number, but there are some amendments that we're going to hear at second. Just want to thank the committee for these 7. Thank Tamara and Jennifer for working on this and all, since August, really, of 2021. And I'm sure Tamara has been working on this far beyond. It went through the planning commission process. We had the hearing with the public testimony. Every opportunity we had for testimony, written testimony, and submitting comments and amendments. So thank everyone for getting this modification, something that I think we're going to be continuing to do probably almost every year.
We have a
So-
list.
So get prepared. This is kind of just the beginning of this continued transformation. Thank you all again, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.